Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome for those of you here and also at home or your office or wherever the telecast find you. It's a great pleasure today to introduce Carolina Aguilar, who has become, since 2019, a friend of the house and is the current leader of one of our largest technology transfer projects, which we call InBrain today. It had other names historically, and Carolina might tell us a little bit of the history and meandering facts that became what it's today, one of our most successful technology transfer projects. Carolina is a rare breed of enthusiasm and fun and incredible capacity for execution. Here in science circles, we fall in love with our ideas, with our science, with our technologies, and forget that for any technology to reach the market, an enormous effort in execution, industrialization, and processes that we ignore when we do our science are essential for anything to become useful. Because innovation is really that, is really knowledge made useful. And the faster, the better, and the bigger, the better, and the more impact in society, the better. And Carolina has had laser focus in execution and in utility, usefulness of science. And she and her team are making today huge strides in providing solutions for therapies, for monitoring the human brain, and using technology that was born here, graphene-based technology. She and her team expect to provide soon palpable, tangible solutions for a problem that everyone in this room will be or has been touched in their life, which is mental disease. Parkinson's, depression, anxiety, you name it. It's rare to find a single person in this world that hasn't been touched or knows someone who hasn't been touched by neural disease. It is, with an aging population, a growing problem. So if it's a problem today, it will become more of a problem in the future. And we are happy today to have Carolina to tell us how she and her team are working in providing new solutions. So I encourage you to make questions, and even those are uncomfortable questions about money, for example, something we don't talk much about here, or we talked in hushed tones, but we'll discover that money is just energy that propels the innovation machine. Not the only one, but certainly a necessary one. Necessary, but not sufficient. So huge pleasure to have Carolina, who has become an example of successful entrepreneur, a successful scientist turned entrepreneur, has become a friend, a mentor, and most of it, she's a lot of fun to hang out with. And I hope you all have an opportunity to know her better and maybe interact with her, because she's really the kind of person you're going to have at your side when you're trying to do difficult things. So with that, I leave you with Carolina.
You sound like my mother. Thank you, Pablo. Well, first of all, I wouldn't be here if it's not because of you, right? So everything starts here in ICN2 with ICRIA, with other partners in Manchester, with the Graphene flagship. But it is very important to remember that this journey starts here. And it starts from all that you have in your heads and that you translate with your hands in products, in ideas that then need to be executed. And I'm just the channel that provides that translation from that science to the medicine part. So thank you, because I feel like I come back home, right? And of course, thank you to José Garrido and Costas Costarelos that are professors here and that are leading this journey as well. So first of all, who has heard about InBrain Neuroelectronics? Can you raise your hand? Pablo, a little bit. And Gustavo deals with us every day. But okay, there's few people that have heard about what we do. I'm going to show you a few things about what we do and why we do it, which is the most important thing. And then how do we go from a Nature paper to the patient's bed, and even better, the patient's life. And please interrupt me at any time, really, because this is about, just a second, is it working? No, it's not, but I have my finger, which hopefully works great. It's not, it's not. Anyway, we are a company that is at the intersection of deep tech, med tech, and digital health. And you will see that this talk is about collaboration being the new innovation. And the collaboration of and the merging of all these three industries is actually what brings the innovation, because deep tech by itself could be very cool, but deep tech in healthcare is actually really, really, really interesting, because there's a lot of cases that actually are merging all these. And then if you put digital health on top, then is the best combo that you can have. So we are this combo that decodes neural signals into breakthrough medical solutions. We founded the company in 2020. Actually, it was December 2019. And it was just at the beginning of the pandemic. I don't know if you remember, but it was not the best moment to found a company and find money to actually drive it. But we did it, you know. I think one of the most important things in life, and the biggest skill that it will be required for success in career development, is courage. So it's not going to be knowledge, it's going to be courage, because the biggest limitations are in your head. So if you can overcome those, you can do anything, right? From everywhere in the world. So we founded in 2020, and we needed money because, look, I had to work for free 1 year, and I was in a very cool company called Medtronic, which is the biggest one in medtech. So that's hard. And then I had to bring in engineers that were not happy to work for free. But we did it for a year while we were actually working with the sheep data that was going to give us Series A. So to lead this journey, you need money. It's the necessary evil, and you need to return that money later. So, you know, it's like huge responsibility on your shoulders. So you have to think very well what you do with your money, because at the end, it has to have a return on patients' lives first, and then on all these people that trust you. But we were very fortunate to have two Catalan medtech VCs, Asavis and Alta. And then that helped us to bring another two German, one on the deep tech side, as I said, VS Square, and the other on the digital health, which is True Venturo. And this is a very nice board, I tell you. Difficult because these cultures and thinkings clash sometimes. Medtechs are usually more traditional, more feet on earth, which I think is very much needed in healthcare. But then you have the deep tech that also bring you that incredible inspiration that you can achieve anything in life, you know. So it's really good. We are a graphene flagship spinoff, as you know, I mean, partners of the graphene flagship ICN2 ICREA, with some patents also from the University of Manchester. And that also helped a lot to actually understand what is our mission, right? So we have to bring this to market safely to patients and decoding these break signals. With the money that we got last year in March, we were able to go from 5 people, for founders basically, to 48 people, and now more than 35% of women. And as I'm a female, apologize, but you know, I need to keep pushing, you know, like women getting into STEM and science. We also managed to close a collaboration with Merck, which is the oldest pharma company in Europe. So it's a very European synergy that we are making here with a graphene flagship with Merck, and created another company called InBrain Neuroelectronics. So InBrain is going to do central nervous system, while Innervia does peripheral nervous system applications. And with this collaboration with Merck, actually we are developing a system that actually interacts with the vagus nerve for very systemic, very broad applications. Just to give you an example, the first indication of Merck is about 6 billion. So it's very big pharma type of thinking. And I'm sorry that I talk so much about money, but you are going to see that that's necessary. After Series A, which were with that money, we need to bring this technology, we are going to bring this technology to first in human next year. But then afterwards, we have a team of 50 people we have to maintain and a very demanding technology we had to develop. So we are going to be looking for a Series B of 55 million. And I'll explain you what this series mean for the ones that are interested. But why? Why are you here? Why are we doing this? And then we will come back to the why, because it's the most important thing. So the brain, or with the current tools, actually, of metal, so platinum or iridium, we have only decoded about 100,000 neurons, which is the size of a zebrafish. Now, the human brain is nearly 100 billion neurons. And if we don't understand the brain, we cannot fix it, right? We have to fix it because 1 out of 3 people in Europe actually have a neuro-related disorder. And as you said, we will have either Parkinson, Alzheimer, or something like that in the future. It's almost guaranteed. So, okay, they give you drugs, but 30% of the patients after a while don't respond to drugs. So they don't have any other alternative. And this creates a huge cost for the society of about 800 billion per year only in Europe. Yeah? So on the other hand, every leap in humanity has been linked to a key material, from a Stone Age to Silicon Age now. And in neurotech, we are stuck with metals, and we really believe that bidimensional materials like graphene could be the next frontier material, just like silicon on chips. I won't talk about graphene because I think here you have heard a lot about graphene, but it's a very cool material that actually delivers new physics. And that's the most important thing. It's a radical change. It's not an incremental solution. And why we need that? I had the fortunate to work 13 years in Medtronic in a therapy called deep brain stimulation that so far has helped more than 200,000 patients around the world with Parkinson, epilepsy, obsessive compulsive disorder, and all of that. Now, 70 years ago, 35 years ago, this technology was top, right? Because there was nothing else. But in modern times, are we willing to carry a big pacemaker with a cable on the neck with 2 big leads on your brain that actually are not ensuring that from patient to patient, we have the same reproducibility? Because metals cannot be miniaturized, and this is what we have so far, pacing technology adapted to neuromodulation. Well, that's why it's not surprising that 50% of the patients that don't have any other solution actually reject it. And that's exactly what we can fix with graphene. So we can miniaturize, so we can have less side effects on very small implants that actually can be worn more comfortable, so increase patient adoption, have a much higher resolution, up to 10 times higher resolution than with metals, so we can have better outcomes, and then modern this to couple electronics and Fitbit and Apple Watch to integrate data from the environment of the patient and deliver full closed loop personalized treatments, right? That's what we are doing. Now, how are we doing that? So the brain so far has been decoded nuclei by nuclei. Subthalamic nucleus for Parkinson, anterior nucleus of the thalamus for epilepsy, and like that we'll never make it because it's 100 billion neurons and a huge complexity. So we are going network by network. So we have motor networks, we have psych networks, we have epilepsy networks. And what we are doing is, well, you might remember Michael J. Fox many times with these troublesome symptoms on TV, all the time like that. Well, that can be corrected, right? And that's huge for the quality of life of the patient. So how are we going to do that? We place an interface on the cortex, on the motor cortex specifically of a patient, and another one in the subthalamic nucleus, looking at the nigrostriatal pathway, right? And then we detect pathological biomarkers, like in the cortex, there is this high gamma that correlate to dyskinesias, and in subthalamic nucleus, high beta that correlate with bradykinesia. So by detecting and decoding these, we can stimulate and actually correct them. And you see that then the blue line gets on time, on therapy, right? So we get the patients back on the highest percentage of time on therapy. So on quality of life, on normal life. So it's like, I don't know, you might have been in contact with diabetes patients and they have these sensors now that get them also without fluctuations. It's the same thing. It's like a glucose meter for the brain, right? So that's what we are doing. And to mimic that, this is the system we are building. So cortical interface, subcortical interface connected to an intelligent chip that actually does real life neural signal decoding and integrates with other wearables to actually bring the best personalized therapy to the patient's life. Yeah. And in parallel, we have this Inervia Bioelectronics company with Merck that actually is exploring that vagus nerve indication for this very broad systemic application. So in the future, our vision is to connect central and peripheral nervous system, because at the end we have one nervous system, right? So maybe in the future, just from the cortex, we can modulate all our organs, right? So that's the vision. Now, there is a very long journey there, I tell you. Just a few things more, a double click on these interfaces. This is what you have today if you have an issue. So cortical and subcortical. So I'm going to get a tumor resection today. I get this in my brain. So 4 contacts compared to what we are building, which is 60 contacts, 10,000 times smaller, flexible, and with more resolution. Now, what does it mean? These are the GLP studies. So GLP studies are the regulatory must that you have to have before having a first in human, right? So it's a very controlled study that looks at safety and the potential of the material in this case. And look, in the same surface of a craniotomy, where you can put 2 of the contacts of the metal, we can put 60 of ignite or graphene. Now, Jordi Rumia from the Clínica Provincial here in Barcelona was telling me, okay, if I have to operate a tumor resection in a kit, this one of metals is like having a GPS. I want to go to Seville and it tells me I'm in Europe, because what you get from those 2 contacts is these 2 little lines. And where do you know is the tumor? What do you do with that? Now, with graphene, you get this and you get that mapping, right? So we put that in the somatosensory cortex of a sheep, and then we touch the tongue of the sheep, and the darker the color, the more it corresponds to the sheep, to the tongue. So, okay, this doesn't work, but no worries. If now you have a tumor, right? You know where to cut and where not to cut. So you will cut on the orange, more yellowish, but you wouldn't touch the darker color, because then you will affect the tone, then you will affect the speech, for instance. So this gives you a huge precision on our first application, which is brain mapper for tumor and epilepsy resection. Now, if this was a brain-computer interface and you have your hand and you move the fingers, you will know which finger corresponds, to which movement, and you could program the prosthesis in a way that you can have fine movements with a robotic arm, right? So look at the applications we're looking at in the future. Now, we are going to bring this to humans for the first time in the world. So graphene is going to be put in the first human next year for the first time in the world. And then we need to chronify it, and then we need to build all that intelligent chip, right? So it's a long journey, but we are on track. Okay. Hi, Alex.
Hi.
I'm going to pass in any case. I know I cannot. Okay. So remember, we had to get money to do this, because otherwise it's not possible. What we have done with that money and what is left to be done, right? So we got, there was all this development by you guys on ICN2. Then we found the company in December of 2019. We said 2020 because it was really the end of December. We got the first million to bring some people to work, some of them for free, some of them, we had to pay for the sheep studies, to have to build the devices. And then in March last year, we get the money. Now, when they give you the money, it has to be put to work, right? There's no time to waste, and the time is clicking, and everything needs to be very focused to deliver, right? So you see everything that had happened since that moment. But the first thing is biocomp. You know, you have a new material and people are like, so how is it biocompatible? Right? So you start working on biocomp. And not only that, you have to work under regulatory ISOs, right? So you cannot do in your lab, your test. No, you go ISO 10993 and you check a lot of points and battery of tests to actually prove that you are biocompatible. And that's what we are still doing, because it's a very big task. Then we had to talk to a hospital, in this case, Manchester University Hospital, to have the first in human. And that's also a very big work, because you have to draft the protocol, you have to pass the ethics, you have then to submit to the regulatory bodies in MHRA, in UK, and so on. But we signed that contract and we are working really, really diligently with Professor David Koop on making this happen next year. We did a lot of feasibility testing, but the real proof that sticks there as a stamp is the cortical GLP safety study in sheep, which is like 10 sheep that you have to do under this strict protocol to prove the safety and the potential of your material. And we also submit a 510(k) call submission to the FDA. So this is the first time FDA has seen graphene on their plate, and we were trying to understand what is the perception. Now, the good news is that they said, okay, we're not going to talk about nanomaterials, we're going to talk about novel materials. And as long as you comply with the predicate in the market, so with the metals and with thin films in safety and electrical safety and biocompatibility, you will be fine to come to the US, even with sheep data. Now, we still are going to do the first in human, but it was very encouraging to hear that we had a chance if we complied with what it's already established in biocomp and electrical safety. No? So the other thing is that you have to have a quality management system certified, ISO certified by a regulatory body in Europe. In our case, we chose TÜV-SÜD. TÜV-SÜD is, for me, one of the best. They have the most knowledge in neuroscience. They are with Medtronic, they are with Boston, they are with the big ones, and they want to support the small ones. And as we speak, we have 2 auditors in InBrain this week during 3 days to look at all our documentation to make sure they will come here tomorrow, by the way, Gustavo, to make sure that we are doing the things in the right way for the sake of the patient's safety, right? So that's also a huge endeavor to take. We have 3 quality managers working in this since a year to get it on track and to get the certification. And what is left to do, so Series A was divided in 2 tranches, tranche 1. So if you are on track, they give you tranche 2. If not, goodbye, you know, nice to meet you. And it was a nice company. But we managed to get the trust to get the second tranche. And with that second tranche, we have to get by the end of next year to first in human in the cortical and to prove the effectiveness of the subcortical on this intelligent network modulation proof of concept in animals, right? So, you know, it seems like very 2 simple dots, but there's a lot of work behind those. Now, yeah. So the question is, having a Nature paper is fantastic, but it's not enough. Because Nature papers are just the seed. But these technologies need to come to Carlos. And Carlos Rodriguez is a real patient. He's the president of the Valladolid Parkinson's Disease Association. And I can tell you something. He has 3 kids. He had a wife that died from breast cancer last year while he was very, very sick with his Parkinson's disease. And he was so sick that he could not really take care of, I mean, he's a wonderful father and he's taking care of these 3 kids. But, you know, we are working on the system and we asked him, what would you like the system to do? And he said, if I could know when am I gonna be good to take my kids to an excursion, that would be fantastic, right? Because I can live with these movements, but I need to be able to be good for them when they need me, right? So it's great to have this, but we need to translate it to that. And at the end, Carlos had DBS, the brain stimulation, so the legacy therapy that we talked about before that still has the pacemaker. And so he had to wait 1 year on waiting list to get it, right? So if we could do something better, simple to implant, and that really works, we're going to help a lot of Carlos. But we need to do all these. We need to drive regulatory pathways. We have to get ISO certifications. We have to do the heavy documentation. We have to take our processes to industrialization. We have to go through all these critical clinical protocols and ethics submissions, heavy testing, biocom, electrical, mechanical. So it's a big collaboration effort. Right? And it's not, we're just at the beginning. You know, a first in human is it's around here, right? I mean, you do all this and then you go to clinical trials and then you have feasibility and then pivotals, and then it's a very long journey, but it's a lot of heavy lifting. And what I'm seeking, or one of the missions I have here, I live in Switzerland, and now that I came back here to semi-live, because I come every other week for InBrain, what I realized is that in R&D, we have spent a lot of time on the R of research and very little, as Spain, on the D of development. So now what I faced is that, okay, we have great science and great transference of IP and everything, but when you want to build it for commercialization, this is missing the regulatory piece, all the ISOs. So I cannot take any of these products to Carlos without any ISO on fabrication, for instance, right? So I know it's heavy, right? But we need to build all this industrialization tissue if we want to progress, because otherwise we'll have Nature papers in a lot of drawers or media files, right? So together we need to think, how are we going to make progress in humanity by also leveraging what is missing that enables us to take science to medicine? Any question here? Now I'm going to go for the deep part after that.
Thank you for the presentation, very interesting. Just why did you decide to leave Medtronic and start this journey with
So I was in Medtronic 13 years. So I was kind of a baby when I arrived there, and I was in Spain first, and then I went to the European headquarters, and then I did global. So I had done a lot of things in those 13 years. And in the last 3 years, I was in a very cool project, but also risky, that was about the development of digital diabetes clinics with a value-based healthcare model, so payment per outcomes. And there was uncertainty how that project was going to scale. And I really wanted to do that project because I had dedicated 3 years of my life, and there was a lot of traction. And we signed a wonderful deal in Saudi Arabia to monitor 10,000 patients digitally. So I was very passionate about that. And I went to see José Feliu Asabi's. And I said, I want to propose an equity carve out to Medtronic because there's some clarity there what's going to happen. And when I was trying to work that out, that of course I knew it was not going to work in Medtronic because who's going to sell me these clinics? But anyway, I met José. You know, that day I was with José Feliu, José and Mario Capizani were pitching InBrain. And Joe calls me and is like, do you want to come to this pitch and tell me what you think? Because I have been giving feedback to Joe many years back, like 10 years back, about projects, not like a due diligence, but just one more input of his due diligence. So he, I guess, will trust my instincts there. And they offered me to be CEO at the beginning, and I said no, because I was disappointed about the speed in innovation in neuro after so many years. But then we took the prototypes to London, to Ludwig Strinson, UCL. He looked at us and said, this changes everything. You have to make it happen. And that's how we said, okay, let's make it happen. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. When you look back at what you're achieving, it's a little frightening. There's a lot of things that already happened, a lot that need to happen for things to go the right way. I'm trying to get in the boots of the researchers here in the room or listening to us online. At what point of this evolution of a company, a researcher needs expert support to do all those things that are so far away from research? And what is the role of a researcher when it gets so big and so many things have to be taken into consideration that are far away from the lab?
So this is a great segue for my next slide. I'm going to skip the money. I'll come back to the money. The most important is to understand what is in it for me and what is your why. I always ask every person in our team. I don't like to say my team, it's never yours, right? Like it's our team. What is your why in life? So we have some years on planet Earth. We know its limit. What are you going to use them for? What is what drives you? Because if you choose a job that you love, you will never have to work a day in your life, right? And if you do this, man, you have to love your work, I tell you. So the first thing is, did you feel the instinct of going through something like that? Because, hey, I felt I could not be a researcher. I'm a neurotoxicologist. I went to Virginia Tech to do my thesis on the pesticides and implications on neurochemistry, Alzheimer's. And I could not wait one day for a Western blot, right? Like I was not patient enough. So I knew I had to go somewhere else. Now, if you're fine being a researcher, hey, we still need Nature papers and then someone else to translate them, right? So first you need to understand if you feel that in your gut and what is your purpose? What is your purpose in life? What is your why? How are you going to spend those days? The next is, do you want to develop new knowledge? And you can develop new knowledge in your field, but you know there's all that other side that you could also develop into. So you want to go that direction or not, and learn regulatory and learn clinical and learn all that is required to bring it to Carlos. And if not, do you feel like you want to be a complement for that? So, okay, I'm a scientist, I know, and if I want to go in a startup, you're going to be less of a scientist, I tell you, because we don't do research. We just do development. Like when you get the money, there's little time for research. But you can cooperate with research institutes. You can still do things aside, but you have to know what you want and what knowledge you want to develop. And then what is the progress you want to do in humanity, right? So what is the speed of innovation you want to leave behind? What is your ambition, right? And being with Nature papers is already amazing. So I'm not saying you have to do something else, right? But you have to think about it at least. Okay, so what is your scope of impact? And how big, how small, how transversal? What do you want to do? And then never forget, you are a patient or you will be a patient one day. So what can we do that then we would like to receive, right? Like, see, if you are in healthcare, it's again the same, you know, how do you contribute to your own well-being actually in the future, right? So those are the questions that I will ask you to answer what you asked me, because you have a lot of thinking to do. I don't know if I answered correctly.
Well, thank you very much for the talk. It's really very impressive. So regarding the regulatory, so do you see some difference according to your experience, how it works in Spain related to the rest of Europe or the rest of the world? So what should we improve? Because in the universities or in the research centers, so we would be willing to do it, but we see that there are a lot of administrative issues that prevents to do this in a very flexible way. What do you see as a difference, and can we improve something? So.
Yeah, regulatory is never flexible. So now, yeah, every region has its rules, although there's some homogenization around the world, right? So the standards from Europe, so MDR is called, in our case, medical device regulation, because they are also biotech and pharma. There's similarities between Europe and FDAs or US, but they are not the same. And they might be requirements that actually are completely different. Now, if you go to Japan, it's also different. If you go to Canada, it's also different, right? Now, if you go, for instance, and you get CE mark is valid also, for instance, in Canada. So there's some compatibilities, let's say. The good news is that there are very clear rules of what you have to do at every step to get to certain phases, right? So it's not flexible, but it's clear of what you have to do. And it's about following that. I mean, first decide where do you want to do the first movement? Is it US? Is it Europe in general, two big markets? And then the rest. What I find is that we are now in Europe in a very big transition from the so-called MDD to the MDR regulation, which is heavy. And things are a bit stuck. And I think a lot of people are working to make it better. But right now it's kind of difficult to bring anything quick in Europe. And also Europe took the position that, okay, we are not going to give consultancy to companies. They have to figure out themselves to avoid conflict of interest. But I'm not a fan of that, because now that I had the chance to interact with FDA, we don't have time to get lost and lose money and time, and also time for patients, for a therapy for patients. So if they don't tell you what to do, you have to figure out, and you take double because you make mistakes and you get to roadblocks. So the FDA has this way of consulting in a way that is productive, right? So they tell you, hey, don't go that way because we're never going to let you go that way. But there are all these other options. Just choose your path, knowing that that's not the way, So, and you have to have very clever people. So we took more than a year and a half to hire a head of quality and regulatory. So you don't take anybody, right? It has to be good. And it has to know internationally what's going on, because otherwise they get you lost. And every misstep is money and is time that you don't have. So it's an art, and we made a lot of mistakes. So
I have a question for you, Carolina. For young researchers trying to establish themselves in science, in European landscape, all this dance of regulatory ICOs, ISOs, millions of euro might be a little bit overwhelming. So what would your advice to the researcher that is making her first steps in innovation? Typically, I have this idea. I would like to do this application. What would be your advice for those first steps?
Okay, so let's then go back to this money piece, because in anything you do, you need some money. So everything you do, you need support, right? Not only money, people is the most important, but money as well. So when you are here on research, right, at least you need to understand what is the unmet clinical need you can support with what you are developing, right? So is there sufficient need to actually embark on this process? Because if it's a very rare disease of, okay, we also have to do a lot of work for these people, but you're going to have less support for something that is very small than for something that is bigger, right? So what is what you are doing? What is your product concept? And here you have usually institutions helping you here with not so much little money, not so much money needed. But then if you have to go to prototypes and IP protection, IP is very expensive, I tell you, right? So to protect IP at the beginning seems cheap, but then on the protection phase, on the many years of protection phase, I will say we are spending more than 300,000 per year, right? So, I mean, it's a lot of money. So you have to think about what are you protecting that is key at that point and not get crazy, right? And then, there's angel investors, there are accelerators that can give you money. Of course, at the beginning, a lot of non-dilutive, so grants, right? To start developing that concept and get to this first in human. Now, we probably could have done better, right? If I would do it in brain again, probably I would have a start with more non-dilutive at the beginning. But to bring the expertise that I needed, all these top 1 engineers that we needed to go fast, I needed to get Series A already here at the beginning, because these people don't grow from the trees, and you have to bring them from where they are working. They are not at home sitting, right? So you have to pay them, and they are also not very cheap. So you need to understand how big is your opportunity so as to play with this series of money. And then of course you have to have a business case. So you have to know business a little bit. I will advise you, if you are going to go into any startup development, you take a business course. We all need to know the basic of business. As I need to learn the basics of graphene, and I didn't have a clue, right? So I was in Wikipedia a lot at the beginning. Also for this, I was in Wikipedia. The first time they asked me for a cap table, I had to Wikipedia it. You know, in Medtronic, after 13 years, you don't learn these concepts. So I know other things. I know how to manage 140 million P&L, right? It's a different. But if you don't know, you just learn, right? Like there's not any barrier. I mean, right now with the amount of knowledge that is floating there, there's no limit, right? So you just learn it. But then it's managing all these, right? So you have to have a business plan, you have to have the idea, you have to protect your IP. And the most important is the people. And I will finish with that also because I have to go to CNN. But the path to health is really about extraordinary people. And if you don't have extraordinary people, you don't have anything. So the most important thing of InBrain, beyond graphene for sure, is the people that are behind InBrain. So we have these 48 people, actually 50 people team, and we have to bring them from 14 different countries because they are not also there, you know, in Barcelona, right? So we had to go where the talent is, and we grew up being hybrid because of that, because wherever they are, we go and get them, right? So you see people, of course, like José. José spent 15 years in Munich. Get out of your countries. That's the other thing. You have to see the world, right? Like you have to know other mentalities. You have to understand different perspectives. So be broad, be global. And I'm very glad that he did that and many others here as well. But we start from José, from the nanomaterials, but then we had to bring all the people that know how to translate prototypes to products in healthcare. And these people were in Philips, then they created Sapiens, then Sapiens was acquired by Medtronic, and then they left to Onward Medical, which is this great startup in Switzerland that had made 9 paraplegic patients walk again with also stimulation. So they came here. And also Michel was the CTO of Sapiens that was acquired by Medtronic. And then we have experts in microfabrication, and the VP of regulatory and quality in Medtronic for 16 years retired. And I said, Eric, you cannot retire. You're so young. You had to help us. So he also joined. And then a very big clinical board that you see, people from Stanford like Helen Bronte-Stewart, Alfonso Fasano, a super young neurologist in Canada, which is the biggest center in neuro. There, Fiorella Contarino in Amsterdam, and all these people in UCL. Patricia, that was in the very first DBS implantation ever in Grenoble. So, I mean, super experienced people. And now we are creating the vision board, and we hope to bring Kostya. He gave us a preliminary yes, but the Nobel Prize of Graphene, and we already got David Eagleman, which is CEO of a startup also in neuro, and a neuroscientist author at Stanford. So great people and courage. That's what I will leave you with. And I'm here, so you can contact me anytime. I mentor a lot of people as much as I can. I am a mentor in the Graphene flagship. I've been in IT health. And you know, my why is to make a significant contribution in healthcare, but also make better societies. And as part of making better societies, I want to try to make people grow, have self-awareness, and think about their whys. So if you want me to help you at some point, I'll be happy. I cannot take everybody, but I'm willing to support where I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. We certainly hope to see you around a lot. I know you are. So there will be plenty of chances to continue this conversation through ICN2, through InBrain. So feel free to contact the Business and Innovation Office, of course, which is part of the effort too, and the growing group of experts at InBrain. And thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for the people at home or the office. And we can give Carolina a warm goodbye with another applause.
I just wanted to say that this is not yet a success. This is a partial success. Until this technology is not really helping people and we all see it, it's not a success, right? Like we could not be complacent at this stage or be happy. I mean, be happy, yes, and be proud, but it's a journey that still needs a lot of work. So we need you, and we need ICN2, and we need CNM, and we need all these ISOs to make it happen. So I hope that we can count on each other and see together the birth of that real cool project, which is Ignite, helping people like Carlos. So I really, truly count on you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.